the years, there are so many things that stay the same and so many things that change. Cities are built up all around us, and the modern is completely amazing. It's a sight to behold. But at the same time, we have ruins of old buildings where we can literally walk through history at that moment. We can learn about it and we can remember, and we have history lessons and fairy tales and legends and true stories sometimes, and it's all amazing what's once was and what's new now. But sometimes we need to look back, and sometimes it's interesting to remember what came before us. And that's why today I want to talk about the urban legends in the Victorian era, what they once believed, and some of them we can say, yes, it was mass hysteria that caused that, but sometimes there are question marks left behind that we have to think about and we have to question. And that's what I hope to do today. I would like to speak about something called Spring-Heeled Jack. And this particular legend began when a young servant girl called Mary Stevens was walking home from her job, and it was quite late at night, and someone sprung out of the shadows and forced themselves on her, and with what seems like claws, they tore at her clothing, and she managed to get away. Um, and that was in 1837. And then shortly thereafter, a woman was at home and she heard a knock at the door, and she answered the door, and a man did the same thing. He tore at her clothing, and she thought she'd never get away, but luckily she did. But when she did, she recalled the claws and eyes as red as coal. That man breathed fire and leapt away so she was safe, and she reported it. And then later a magazine reported there was someone called Jane Alsop, and that was in 1838, who caught sight of Spring-Heeled Jack, and she said he was vomiting fire, and it was quite scary to behold. Again, this could be seen as a case of mass hysteria caused by journalism of the times embellishing details of what could have just been a random attack, or it could have been something such as a serial attack, someone who was emboldened by being able to carry out the first attack, so it happened more than once. But yes, it caused quite a stir. Our next legend is of doubles and doppelgangers, and this actually began when a civil servant believed he saw someone in London who appeared to be his double, and he gave chase to this person, but they vanished around the corner and he couldn't find them. And then, not too long after that, someone called Mrs. Alsop saw what she believed to be her sister in London, but it was in hospital dying. And from there onwards, it became a much more common thing that people would see what appeared to be their double, a double of someone they cared about, a loved one, a family member. And from there, it was believed that seeing your doppelganger was a sign of danger or death, and that created a panic that took them over completely. And it can be seen as a purely psychological thing. around the time that these things were happening, Victorian London was being a lot more urbanised. There were bigger buildings, they were much more gothic. Um, there was more modernisation, but it meant that such a small city in the first place was now a big sprawling city with tall buildings. It was like a maze, but along with that came a lot more people to add to the population, and obviously there would be people that looked alike, and that was what was being confused for being their doubles or doppelgangers. So this is a case of mass hysteria, but it's a case of something looking so much like what they believed to be bad luck that was actually just the growth of their population. The next legend isn't a very big legend. It's very short and very to the point. It's called the Black Sewer Swine of Hampstead, and it revolved around people believing that there were basically an army of pigs that would run riot in the sewers underneath the town. And this was a basic urban legend. Um, Someone recalled seeing a pig let loose in the sewers, you know, very unlikely to be true. And then that pig from there had a litter, and they fed off the rubbish in the sewers, which meant they didn't really leave. And this legend was only put away, put to sleep when the sewers were renewed and there was actually more pipes causing an outflow of, beyond the sewers, which meant that, conditions were a lot better and it was, even more unlikely. Okay, so the final legend that I wanted to discuss has actually got roots throughout time in different circumstances and different places, but in the Victorian era it particularly took off. And that is the case of haunted cemeteries, haunted graveyards. And there was a lot to cause people to believe in things such as this. There was a case where someone passed away and was buried, and then a while later the body was exhumed, and they said it was in amazing condition, and the hair had continued to grow and the nails had continued to grow, um, which led people to believe something a little more sinister was at work. Um, there was a few instances of people being buried at the time when they were still living. It just seemed that they had passed on. So there was a lot of the time where people would be buried with bells attached to their graves, so that if the same thing happened, they would be able to ring the bell. Um, and obviously, because of the modernisation of a lot of Victorian places, the population nearly doubled, and that would lead to more graves and less space, so people wouldn't be buried deep enough. There would be cases of body snatching, things such as that, which caused a lot more of a panic, and people believed something a lot more sinister was going on. Um, and I believe this is the kind of thing you have to leave up to your own imagination, do your own research, because there are a lot of theories and there are a lot of truths and there are a lot of facts that kind of contradict each other, and people believe a lot of different things. So, As the video is ending, that is the question I want to leave you with. Do you believe any of these legends have a lot more truth to them? Or do you believe it's just a case of Chinese whispers and people saying things and causing rumours? Because there are so many different takes on what could be the truth. So please think on that.